Hello there, and welcome back to Thinkology. My name is Oz, and I'm going to be your local floor goblin narrator today. Gonna steal your kneecaps and regale you with interesting facts and information for you to consume. Now to start off, let's figure out what exactly IBM is. IBM is short for the International Business Machines Corporation. You know, the tech company earning tens of millions of dollars in revenue. And much like any other company with over 110 years of history, there's some pretty messed up stuff hiding within the cracks. And these cracks in particular just happen to be about the mass genocide of Jews in World War II. Despite them being an American company based in New York, IBM has a pretty checkered history. But before we get into all that, let's actually start from the beginning. IBM first began as the Computing, Tabulating, and Recording Company, or CTR, in the late 1800s. Their first large contract was to provide tabulating equipment for the tabulation and analysis of the 1890 US Census. It would not be until 1920 the name would officially change to IBM. Their website states that in 1920 they introduced the lock autograph recorder and launched the electric accounting machine. To further their expansion in 1921, they acquired the business of Ticketograph, a company in Chicago, and even in the 30s, when the Great Depression hit, IBM still managed to grow. They were even one of the first corporations to provide group life insurance, survivor benefits, and paid vacations. IBM even has over 9,000 patents for their products, breaking records by doing so. Now, all of this is just to give some background. When World War II began, IBM was industry-leading, reputable, and growing even faster, but unfortunately, it wasn't just the US Census that took note of this and used their tech to their advantage. It was the Nazis as well. When Hitler came to power, a central Nazi goal was to identify and destroy Germany's 600,000 Jews. Now, to the Nazis, Jews were not just those who practiced Judaism, but those of Jewish blood, regardless of their assimilation, their intermarriage, their religious activity, or even their conversion to Christianity. It was only after Jews were identified could they be targeted for asset confiscation, ghettoization, deportation, and ultimately extermination. To search generations of communal, church, and governmental records all across Germany and later throughout Europe was, a cross-indexing task so monumental, it called for a computer. When the final solution sought to efficiently transport Jews out of European ghettos along railroad lines and into death camps, with timing so precise the victims were able to walk right out of the boxcar and into the waiting gas chamber, the coordination was such a complex task, this too called for a computer. But in 1933, no computer existed. However, the IBM punch card and card sorting system did exist. Now, let me make it perfectly clear. I am not stating that World War II wouldn't have happened without the IBM machines. IBM did not cause the Holocaust. However, they did make it disgustingly and revoltingly efficient. One article from Jewish Virtual Library explains exactly how these were used and the massive role IBM played. I was haunted by a question whose answer has long eluded historians. The Germans always had the lists of the Jewish names. Suddenly, a squadron of grim-faced SS would burst into a city square and post a notice demanding those listed assemble the next day at the train station for deportation to the east. But how did the Nazis get the lists? For decades, no one has known, few have asked. The answer? IBM. Germany's census operations and similar advanced people counting and registration technologies. IBM was founded in 1898 by German inventor Hermann Hollerith as a census tabulating company. Census was its business, but when IBM Germany formed its philosophical and technological alliance with Nazi Germany, census and registration took on a new mission. IBM Germany invented the racial census, listing not just religious affiliation, but bloodline, going back generations. This was the Nazi data lust, not just to count the Jews, but to identify them. Now, most of the time when you think of companies that have had some involvement in World War II, you might think about companies that built the gas chambers, made the weapons, funded the Nazi Party, companies that had a direct material influence. However, IBM's role is arguably, if not one of the largest, most enabling roles I've ever seen. Without them, counting Germany's Jewish citizens wouldn't have been nearly as easy. I mean, after all, you can have the most advanced weaponry and the most well-funded group of murderers out there, but committing mass genocide won't be easy if you don't know where the victims are, or their status. IBM, however, made it, well, easier. I can't say it wouldn't have been possible, but perhaps more people would have fled. Maybe more would have survived if not for IBM. It's pretty hard to speculate. I really don't know how the Nazi regime would have operated without IBM, but it is safe to say they were a gigantic aid to the Nazi Party. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, you poor naive soul, maybe IBM didn't know what the German government was doing with their machines and data. Nope! IBM was perfectly aware of what was going on. It's not as if the machines were stolen or purchased under the guise of something else. One source says that IBM knew on a daily basis throughout the 12-year Reich. The worst of it being is that IBM preferred not to know. They had a don't ask, don't tell policy, which was the order of the day. This would be bad enough, horrific enough, but IBM has even contradicted themselves when speaking about the role they played in the war. IBM has consistently stated through its spokesman that it has no information about how its machines were being used. But that is the opposite of what IBM itself stated during World War II to American investigators probing IBM's Geneva office. Werner Lear, IBM's European manager in Geneva until Germany surrendered, was the company's top officer in Europe, involved with virtually every transaction in every country throughout the war. Lear himself defined IBM Geneva not as an autonomous detached office, but as a nexus, which simply implemented the business decisions made by IBM New York. On April 29, 1942, Lear outlined for the American consul in Geneva exactly how IBM Geneva operated. "You will readily understand," explained Lear, "that this office is a clearing office between the local organizations in the various countries and the New York headquarters." Lear even added that IBM New York made all the decisions. His function was to simply monitor the business and keep the records. The European headquarters in Geneva, Lear explained, are in a way a representative of the world headquarters in New York, whose job it is to manage and control European affairs. In short, the functions of the Geneva office are purely administrative. Now, I'm pretty damn inclined to believe Lear here, that the Geneva office and those supplying the IBMs to the Nazi regime had to go through the New York headquarters. At the very least, I really doubt that IBM HQ had absolutely no idea what was going on. I mean, wouldn't they see more and more machines being supplied to Germany? Wouldn't they at least get one inkling of what was going on? I mean, I could be wrong here, but it seems unrealistic to me that the headquarters would just simply be blissfully unaware. Aside from that aspect, there's also the present attitude that they have towards accountability. I mean, I can forgive a lot of things in a company's history, so as long as they move forward, admit wrongdoing, and make every effort not to repeat the past. But however, that's not the attitude IBM has taken. Instead, they've gone for more of the sweep it under the rug and hope to God no one reads a history book approach. Don't want to take my word for it? Well, here's Robert Wolf, an expert on Nazi records and former chief of captured German government documents for the US National Archives. Quote, "The word has gotten out and a lot of people still alive are supplying information they didn't have the context to understand before." End quote. Wolf told Reuters historians were finding new meaning in previously available papers documenting the use of IBM Hollerith computer machines to carry out the Holocaust. Robert Wolf, who assisted Edwin Black on his book, IBM and the Holocaust, the strategic alliance between Nazi Germany and America's most powerful corporation, had this to say further. "For those who have complained the proof is not there, this leaves little room for deniability. said Wolf, who assisted on research for Black's book. He said the data found in newly uncovered German documents, when combined with IBM corporate files and eyewitness accounts and other sources, answer criticisms first leveled at Black's claims. This is proof that IBM enabled the Holocaust. The connection to New York is now proven, Wolf, a former U.S. infantry officer who ran denazification programs during the U.S. occupation of post-war Germany, said in a phone interview. This dude has quite the goddamn resume. Now, does this mean that World War II wouldn't have happened without IBM? Again, no. I'm sure the Nazis would have found another way. But I find it really fascinating how the source of the Nazis' information wasn't really questioned much. People have questioned who made the gas chambers, who funded the Nazis, but information like this is equally valuable, if not more. It doesn't really leave me much room to wonder why the hell their tech earned the name the Death Calculator. Hell, several Holocaust scholars and leaders of international Jewish groups called on the International Business Machines Corporation to officially apologize for the role its technology and former officials had once played in aiding Hitler. This negates all excuses, said Malcolm Hoenlein, a vice president of the New York-based Conference of Presidents of Major Jewish Organizations. IBM has to look at what its role should be in the light of these revelations, said Hoenlein. An IBM spokeswoman responded by saying that information remains sketchy on the role of the Armunk, New York-based company, and its subsidiaries in Nazi Germany, and that she was unaware of any new evidence implicating IBM. And I quote, "We are a technology company. We are not historians," spokeswoman Carol Malkovich said, noting that, like hundreds of US companies, IBM had started losing control of its business in Germany, beginning with Hitler's rise to power in 1933. So I get where Carol is coming from, but like, my God, does this come across as insensitive. Even if they didn't know the full extent of their company's actions, saying, "We're not historians," sounds like one hell of an excuse. But to be fair, she did add that their company believes the atrocities committed by the Nazis were abhorrent. I mean, you better. Yet the whole "we lost control of our business" line is, also once again something I'm not very convinced by. If the headquarters was in New York and IBM in Geneva had to get approval from HQ, wouldn't their company know what was happening? I mean, hell, even if they did lose control, I just don't know if I can believe they were this blind about it. Now, even John Bukovinsky, IBM's director of worldwide media relations, has shown that he can't give a damn about the situation. When he was asked about the company's involvement in facilitating the extermination of millions of people, he said, "That was 6 years ago." What? A reporter told him the Holocaust was 60 years ago, and he quipped, "So? That's the point." What the fuck, man? Holy shit. No, that was 6 years ago. Actually, it was 60. Oh, still. My dude actually thought it was 6. What the? Infuriating. You could at least say that what IBM did was. Come on! At least say the regime they aided was despicable, but no, you just gotta act like you don't even know what the Holocaust is. My God, my dude. It gets worse. The Jewish Virtual Library again argues that not only what they did was horrific, but their own internal reviews during the war years conceded that the correspondence, primarily through the Geneva office, was often fakes. Dates were falsified, revised contract provisions hid true facts, misleading logs, and chronologies were kept. They knew something was up at HQ, and they didn't act. Machines weren't even sold either. They were only leased. The machines being used in the concentration camps were IBM property, even as they were in operation. Either IBM had a bunch of bats and naked mole rats working their offices, or they're trying to hide shit. Either way, something's not right. And it doesn't just stop with the Jewish population either. There are more casualties because of these damned machines. Hell, one of those populations were the Gypsies. In 2004, according to CNN, in regards to this, a Swiss appeals court decided that a group of 5 gypsies could sue IBM in Switzerland, Previously, a lower court had dismissed the case on the ground that it lacked jurisdiction, deeming IBM's Geneva office as only an antenna and not its European headquarters, but the appeals court held that the jurisdiction was proper. The Gypsies alleged that IBM held a role in facilitating the Holocaust. Specifically, they alleged that IBM helped the Nazis commit mass murder by providing them with the punch card machines and computer technology that resulted in the coding, tracking, and killing of Gypsies. In order to find that this jurisdiction was proper, the Swiss court had to find a connection to Switzerland. It did so, pointing out that IBM's complicity through material or intellectual assistance to the criminal acts of the Nazis during World War II via its Geneva office cannot be ruled out, and a significant body of evidence indicates that Geneva office could have been aware that it was assisting these acts. Now, the plaintiffs in this case are 4 gypsies from Germany and France and 1 Polish-born Swedish gypsy. All 5 plaintiffs were orphaned in the Holocaust after losing family members in death camps. There are only 5 plaintiffs because in Switzerland, class actions are not permitted. But if the plaintiffs win, their lawyers claim that would pave the way for gypsy organizations to demand approximately 12 billion holy shit in damages. It's estimated that at least 600,000 gypsies perished in the Holocaust, and the gypsies themselves put the figure higher than that, at over 1 million. In addition, the GIRCA, or the Gypsy International Recognition and Compensation Action, estimates that the number of gypsies whose parents died in death camps or during forced labor is around 300,000. Although there have been many recent efforts to provide compensation to Holocaust victims, the gypsy community is often reported to have received much less in the way of restitution and reparations than others. The GIRCA's lawyer, Henry Felipe Sambuca, says the various recent Holocaust compensation funds, such as those organized by the Swiss banks and German industry, have often given gypsies a much smaller percentage than to that which they were entitled. Now, this case is extremely important, not only because of holding companies responsible for their actions, but also for giving reparations to the gypsy community, who aren't often talked about when discussing groups affected by World War II. Now, the genocide of the European Roma truly began in 1941 when over 500 gypsies were transported from Austria to the ghetto for Jews in Lodz. Here, they resided in a segregated section. Almost half of them died within the first months of their arrival due to lack of adequate food, fuel, shelter, and medicines. They were considered racially inferior, and historians estimate that 250,000 European Roma, 250,000, were killed by the Germans and their Axis partners. Now, whether the number is 1 million, 250,000, or 600,000, I'm not sure we'll ever know. Yet every single one of these was an individual life with their own hopes, dreams, and goals, and they're far more than statistics. These were hundreds of thousands of people. Now, IBM, of course, was right there lending a helping hand to these despicable murders. A Swiss judge ruled that the precision, speed, and reliability of IBM's machines, especially related to the census of the German population and racial biology by the Nazis, were praised in the publications of Die Helmag itself, the branch of the respondent IBM. It does not thus seem unreasonable to deduce that IBM's technical assistance facilitated the tasks of the Nazis in commission of their crimes against humanity. Acts also involving accountancy and classification by IBM machines and utilized in the concentration camps themselves. However, according to the Business and Human Rights Resource Center, a Swiss court found that the statute of limitations would apply to these cases, and the gypsies were unable to collect reparations. So, a US class action lawsuit was filed saying that IBM was complicit in crimes against humanity, but that was voluntarily dismissed later by the plaintiffs. They stated they wanted to facilitate implementation of the German Holocaust Fund instead. Yet, things are far from over and done with here. See, what's interesting is, how Romania's Central Statistical Institute was unusually well equipped for enumerating which Roma gypsies were refugees and which were in a concentration camp. The extensive role IBM played, the lack of accountability, it's all really worrying to say the least, and I can't definitively state what IBM did and didn't know and what was happening during the war, or how aware the New York headquarters were. There doesn't seem to be receipts for that, but I do believe that at best IBM was negligent and ignored the fact that their technology fell into the wrong hands. At worst, and a far more likely option in my opinion, is that the European branches knowingly aided the Nazi Party and was responsible for war crimes. Oh, this isn't all they've done either. Although my main focus today is their death calculator, there's other shady, fraudulent accusations in recent years. In 2015, IBM had to tell its shareholders that it faced another SEC investigation. This time, federal agents opened up a probe into how Big Blue reported revenue on certain transactions in the United States, the UK, and Ireland. In layman's terms, it means the SEC was looking into whether or not IBM is, cooking the books. This news sent their shares down 4%, and even though IBM claims they have a rigorous and disciplined process for reporting revenue, I kind of find it hard to believe considering they had an investigation in 2013, only 2 years earlier. Not to mention, in the late 90s in Argentina, IBM officials were caught bribing government officials with multi-million-dollar kickbacks routed through Swiss bank accounts. Damn, IBM does not have good luck with the Swiss. They were only made to pay a $300,000 fine, though they admitted no wrongdoing. Not surprised there. Then there's the slush funds, a reserve of money used for illicit purposes. Apparently, IBM had over 100 employees in on bribery and slush funds from at least 2004 to 2009. Now, there's also been allegations in 2013 of overseas fraud. Damn, 2013 was not a good year for them. And claims that top IBM executives may have cooked the books in India. Also, in 2013, the former SEC investigation I mentioned specifically targeted how they reported cloud revenue. And in 2016, IBM was completely banned from doing business with the Queensland government in Australia. Jesus. Oh, and it just keeps going. In August of 2013, the then LNP government confirmed agencies would be prohibited from signing new deals with the IT giant in the wake of a commission of inquiry into a $1.25 billion payroll failure. The inquiry accused a number of IBM employees of ethical shortcomings and underhanded dealings in the lead up to winning the Queensland Health deal. The commission, headed by former Supreme Court Judge Richard Chesterman, tied a number of IBM employees working on the contract bid to serious ethical transgressions, including using leaked information about competitors to gain advantage in attempting to access tender responses by opposing bidders, Logica and Accenture. And last but not least, of course, 3 IBM employees were arrested in Canada in 2015, also on bribery charges. These cases, if anything, prove that IBM hasn't really changed as much as someone might think. And I mean, sure, I'd like to think that bribery charges is better than mass genocide, but, the pattern of behavior throughout this company is, kind of shady. In some ways, I would rather have a company that's just outright terrible, because then at least it'd be a lot easier to, catch and point them out on their bullshit. And again, as far as their World War II operations go, remember that IBM has consistently stated throughout its spokesman that it has no information about how its machines were being used. But we know this is the opposite of what IBM itself has stated during World War II, thanks to Werner Lear comparing the European operations to a nexus of the New York office. Throughout all this, though, the one thing that I think will probably stick with me the most is just how we may never be told or made fully aware of exactly how much IBM actually knew, but that their own manager stated that New York HQ made all the decisions. It's just kind of terrifying to think how involved they were in World War II in committing genocide. Now, if IBM's technology wasn't made readily available to the Nazis, after what I've seen, I have no doubt it may have been a very different situation in the end, and I believe it would have been far more difficult for the Nazis to commit the atrocities they did. Now, this is where I'm going to wrap this video up, and without a doubt, this video pissed me off. And what's really unfortunate is that I used to compete in IBM's yearly Master the Mainframe competition, so this hits in a weird personal point for me. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give this video a like and a subscribe, and maybe I'll give you your unique caps back. Who knows? Anyways, if you want to see more content from me, go check out my channel, Oz Media. If you want to see more from Thinkology, just do the YouTube shenanigans. Anyways, thank y'all for watching and checking this out and making it this far. Yeah, I'm also sorry if I mispronounced some words. Anyways, I'll see y'all next time.